Okay, you can get started.
This is the Fair and Impartial Policing Implementation Subcommittee of the Police Accountability Board. And the date is October 7th, 2021, and the time is now 2:34. Pursuant to Section 3 of Executive Order N-2920 issued by Governor Newsom on March 17th, 2020, and to ensure the health and safety of the public by limiting human contact that could spread the COVID-19 virus, this meeting of the Fair and Impartial Policing Implementation Subcommittee of the Police Accountability Board will be conducted exclusively through teleconference and Zoom video conference, and there will not be a physical meeting location available. If you do not wish for your name to appear on the screen, use the drop-down menu and click on rename to rename yourself to appear anonymous or to use some other name. To request to speak, please use the raise hand icon on the screen, and to join by phone, dial 1-669-900-6833 and enter the meeting ID 874-9045-7845. And if you wish to comment during the public comment portion of the agenda and you're on the phone, press *9 and wait to be recognized. So the meeting will now come to order. And do you want to call the roll, Byron?
Sure, I can do that. What's the time that you call the meeting to order?
2:34.
Okay, all right. I will now call roll. Board Member Calavita.
Here.
Board Member Moore.
Here.
Board Member Ramsey. Not present. Board Member Owens.
Here.
Public Member Crook.
Here.
Public Member Halpern.
Here.
Public Member Lippman.
Here.
Chair, we have quorum.
Thanks. So the next on the agenda is approval of the agenda. Do I have a motion to approve the agenda? Somebody move?
I will move that we approve the agenda.
Second.
Okay.
So hearing no objection, we'll approve the agenda for today.
Excuse me, Chair.
Yeah. Yes.
I just want to note for the record that the agenda for today incorrectly lists Board Member Nathan Mizell as a member of this subcommittee and omits Board Member Cheryl Owens. Just want to note that for the record.
Thank
Okay.
you.
All right.
So next on the agenda is election of a chairperson of the subcommittee. Do we have nominations for that?
I nominate Board Member Calavita.
I second that.
Thank you. I accept the nomination, but I'd be happy to see others be nominated if anybody wants to self-nominate or.
Kitty, I think we're all happy with you.
All right, thank you. Do we need a roll call, Byron?
No. If there's no objection, you can do it without objection.
All right,
Kitty,
seeing no
excuse me, it would be perhaps helpful if someone could list out the powers of the actual public members, because I think that's changed since last year.
Thank you, George. Yes, well, so Byron, do you want to help me on this?
Yes, I will help you.
I believe the charter stipulates that public members will not have voting rights, but will have every other right. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And can public members be chairs of the subcommittee?
That I'm not sure of. Give me a second to check on that.
Also, if we can't vote, may we make motions, second motions?
Okay, just give me a second to check on that.
George, I've never heard anything otherwise. It just says voting.
Okay,
And that was in the charter amendment. It didn't say anything about making motions. I think that they're supposed to have full committee rights other than voting.
Yeah, it seems to be silent on that, so unless there's objection, let's go with that.
With what? That they can make motions and
Yes,
does that answer your question, George?
yes, thank you.
Okay. Is there any public comment today? And let me just say that, you know, subcommittees are often conducted more informally than our full PAB meetings. And sometimes we have sort of go into workshop mode where people in the public can participate in the conversation informally with the rest of us. And so that will happen from time to time. But it sounds like there are no public members other than committee members here today. Is that right, Byron?
actually, we do have a member of the public and they have since raised their hand. So I'm going to allow them to talk if that's okay.
Excellent. Please go ahead.
Okay, Mr. Tariq.
Yes, I'm not sure if I can be heard. Am I being heard?
Yes.
Oh, great. Thank you for indulging me with these comments from a member of the public. I received these police accountability, what is now called the Police Accountability Board agendas on a regular basis. I'm the former director of Bay Area Police Watch. But more importantly, some years ago, I came before the prior board, the Berkeley Police Review Board, I believe is what it was called. And on the 5th of November, 2014, I was the subject of a hearing, not necessarily the subject, but I was the main witness of a hearing that I asked for. And I can tell you that my hope, and that's what I want to express today to this subcommittee, my hope is that fair and impartial policing will become the norm in the city of Berkeley and obviously throughout the entire society, because I must state that from my treatment before the board and by virtue of my interaction with a Berkeley Police Department officer, that hope was dashed. And I just want to briefly state that it was a traffic matter. And even though the board issued a finding that did not support my position of discrimination and discriminatory conduct on the part of the police officer, the Berkeley Police Department did sustain my allegation, which I thought was alarming. And unfortunately, because of POBAR, because of Police Officer Bill of Rights, I was never able to find out what discipline took place for that officer for basically stopping me for driving while black, giving me a false ticket that was not within the vehicle code, and treating me in a manner that I thought was absolutely outrageous and unconstitutional anywhere in the United States. And so I just wonder whether or not the subcommittee is willing to take on the problems that are created by, the protection, overly protective police officer Bill of Rights that did not even allow the Berkeley Police Department to tell me the manner in which the officer was disciplined. And again, I want to emphasize that it was greatly disappointing that the Police Review Commission had no finding of fact in my favor, yet the police department did. And that was very alarming to me. And hopefully we have turned the corner on that kind of lack of oversight. And lastly, I will say this, I really wish that the public members did have voting rights. And I'm not sure exactly why they do not, but at any rate, I'll leave it at that. And thank you for allowing me to be heard.
Thanks so much, Ismail. And I want to say that there's another very active subcommittee in the Police Accountability Board going on now, not right this minute, but we have an active subcommittee on regulations to promulgate new regulations. And the main thing we're looking at carefully is how those complaint hearings are conducted. And that is something that will be going before, has gone before City Council recently and will be going in the future. So you can look for that, and hopefully we're looking to make those complaint hearings more equitable. And so, and the standard of proof has changed now as well. So that's something we're looking at. As for the Police Officers' Bill of Rights, it's unfortunately beyond the authority of this subcommittee, but this subcommittee is looking to implement the fair and impartial policing recommendations that have been made and passed unanimously by the City Council. And it's our task to oversee implementation of those recommendations, which will hopefully improve situations such as you experienced. So thanks for coming forward. Were there any other members of the public, Byron, that wanted to speak?
No, there are no other members of the public present other than Mr. Tariq.
Okay. So next is new business. First on that, in that category is an update from the mayor's working group on fair and impartial policing. And, you know, Izzy, Ramsey, and I were on that mayor's working group. And in your packet for today, you can see what was passed from our recommendations by City Council. But actually, before that, I had intended to say that maybe we should go around and introduce ourselves, because we have some members of the public who may not know everyone and vice versa. So I should start. My name's Kitty Calavita, and I was on the PRC for 3 years and now on the PAB, and I was on the mayor's working group as well. So let's go alphabetically. Jamie Crook, I think you might be next. Could you introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, I'm Jamie Cook. I'm an attorney. I live here in Berkeley. I have a background in civil rights cases and immigrants' rights, and I'm glad to be here on the subcommittee with you all.
Thanks for being here. Elliot.
Right. Elliot Halpern, board member of ACLU Northeast Bay, BCSE, and RCJR. Also was a member of the working group. That should do it.
George?
Yes, hi, George Lippman. I'm a former member and chair of the Police Review Commission, and an analyst of police data with regard to disparities in stops and searches. And I'm currently chair of the City of Berkeley Peace and Justice Commission, and a member of, with Elliot, the Racism and Criminal Justice Reform Group, RCJR. Glad to be here.
Cheryl. I think you're next.
I think you missed Sergeant Lee.
Hi.
Oh,
Good afternoon.
I don't, I'm sorry, I'm on my tablet. I can't see everyone. I'm just going through the committee names. Sergeant Lee.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Peter Lee. I am a sergeant here at the police department, been here for 15 years. I am in the Professional Standards Bureau. I'm one of several individuals overseeing the implementation of these the different items.
Thank you. And Sergeant Lee, will you be with us for each of our meetings or?
I'll definitely try to, yes.
Okay.
And thank you, Cheryl.
Okay.
Chip?
I
think-
think we're on the board member Moore.
Yeah, I was just calling on Chip Moore.
Good afternoon. My name is Chip Moore. I'm a business owner, small business owner here in Berkeley, and a member of the Police Accountability Board and the Planning Commission. Thank you.
Thank you. Cheryl?
My name is Cheryl Owens. I'm also a member of the Police Accountability Board. I'm part of the newest membership, so still learning this process, but enjoying everything.
Thank you. And so Izzy Ramsey is still not with us. Izzy was he's the chair of the PAB and was chair of the mayor's working group on fair and impartial policing. I thought it could be useful.
Hey, let's not forget Byron.
Oh, Byron, everybody knows Byron. Byron, you want to introduce yourself?
You're muted.
I am Byron Norris. I am an expert on Zoom, as you can tell. My former role is as an investigator for the Police Accountability Board. And just for the record, Chair, I'm not staffing the meeting today per se. Staff doesn't normally staff subcommittee meetings except in certain circumstances, but I am here in the background if you need any assistance. We're here primarily to make sure you have Zoom access.
Okay, I do have one question, Byron. I notice in the standing rules, it talks about notes from meetings or some kind of written record. Are we using the Zoom recording as a proxy for that?
Now, your board recently made some changes to that or proposed some changes.
Yeah, I don't think we changed anything there.
You
but-
haven't changed anything yet.
Yeah.
So are those in the current, do you recall if those are in the current standing rules? I haven't found those yet.
I think they are. I mean, it's
Okay.
not, I just was curious.
All right, I don't think it's a hard requirement.
I'll try to make some notes after the meeting.
Yeah, I think the primary aim of that is just so you can make a decent report to the board.
Yeah,
So just handle
Okay.
it. Yeah.
yeah. All right. It seemed to me like maybe we should start by looking at what City Council passed unanimously. It's in your packet for today. The pages aren't numbered, at least mine aren't, but it's page 4 of your packet. And it's from the City Council meeting on February 23rd, 2021. And this is what they passed of the Fair and Impartial Working Group recommendations, which was the majority of those recommendations. Maybe it would help if I backed up a little bit, and George and others, you can chime in here because you have a history with this as well in terms of preceding the mayor's working group. So the Center for Policing Equity, which is a national nonprofit of scholars and former law enforcement and others, were brought to Berkeley to do an analysis of Berkeley policing relating to policing equity. And they did a report for us several years ago in which they reported a rather dramatic racial disparity in stops and searches of people, motorists and pedestrians and bicyclists in the city of Berkeley. And that, I think, was one of the the things that precipitated the formation of the mayor's working group on fair and impartial policing. And the statistics are rather stark in terms of racial disparities. And George, who is here with us today, has done a lot of statistical analysis of this and has found that from 2015 to 2018, Black drivers were about 8 times more likely to be stopped than white drivers in Berkeley. And for Latinx drivers, it was 4 to 1. And for searches, Black drivers were 4 times more likely than white drivers to be searched. Latinx drivers were more than twice as likely to be searched. And in my opinion, the most telling thing about the statistics we have is that the yield rate in terms of citations and arrests was higher for white motorists who were stopped than for Black drivers or Latinx drivers. And so these are the kind of numbers that sort of launched the mayor's working group on fair and impartial policing. And we worked for, I don't know, at least 2 years as a working group. And we heard reports, we heard presentations from the police department and from outside experts. And we had a lot of discussion amongst ourselves. We started out before the pandemic, so these were in person, and then we moved over to Zoom. And so what you see in the packet is the ultimate consequence of those discussions and analyses. And as I said, it was a package of recommendations that was passed unanimously by council. So I guess that we could start, and members, people who have this history, in fact, some of you more than I, better than I, can answer questions if people who are new to this subject want to throw some questions out there.
I want to add one thing, Kitty, that the statistics you read were pretty consistent throughout the whole period that the data was collected since 2015, I think. George can correct that. So I just want to add that that's an important point.
And they continue to be at about that level today, or at least
Yes.
the last time the data were collected. So for those of you who might be new to this subject, are there?
So Kitty,
Yeah,
I was looking at the paperwork and it seemed like, let's see, on where, I think it's page 6. Yes. Where things are highlighted in yellow, those seem like things that they want us to either take the lead on or follow up on. So like, for example, at the bottom of that page, it says quarterly progress updates to the city council and the PAB.
yeah.
On page, it talks about the complaint, the business card has to talk about the complaint process with the PAB. And then I think the next thing is probably key to what we're trying to do is long-term monitoring and assessments will be the responsibility of the police oversight body, so the PAB. So I think this document, the highlighted pieces are really where I would focus.
Cheryl, I frankly don't know who did that highlighting, where that highlighting came from.
Do you have the highlighted pages?
I have a highlighted copy that's in the agenda packet, but I
Chair-
have no idea.
Chair Calavita, I believe those highlights came from Director Lee to assist you all.
Oh, all right. It can be helpful. Yeah, I mean, it can be helpful, but we're not necessarily confined to that.
Yes.
Yeah.
I don't think
So,
Trying
yeah.
to just highlighted pieces, but I think they're pieces we should make sure we at least focus on.
oh, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. You know, there are a few things that we really need, I think, preliminarily to start doing our work. And Sergeant Lee, you can be helpful here, and maybe you can report back to the chief. But one of the things that the council mandated was quarterly progress reports on the implementation. And by my accounting, that maybe, I mean, since the first of these reports was done on June 15th, I think September 15th would have been a due date for a second progress report.
I can answer that question. I can tell you that a new progress report is in progress, so that should be coming out sometime this month.
Byron's correct. It's soon. I don't know the exact date, but it is coming. And yes, so the short of it is yes, it's coming out soon.
And will we be able to keep the quarterly timeline in the future?
Yes, I think if I remember right, it was council had a recess. I forget it was in August or September, and that's one of the reasons why it was pushed back a little bit. But yes, that is a goal.
Katie, can I make a comment?
Sure.
I'm just looking over this for the first time with the highlights.
Yeah.
I think I understand what the director was trying to do here. She highlighted everything that refers to the board. So that's helpful, but that's not the same thing as saying those are the most important referrals to the city manager. So for example, at the top of page 4, implement procedural justice reforms.
Yeah.
The first one is refer amendments to existing BPD policy and the creation of an early intervention system, EIS,
Yeah.
related to traffic and so forth, and so on. And I don't think that I was trying to figure out where is that in the yellow highlighting, and it's not.
Oh, I see. Oh.
So if you wanted a summary of the most important pieces that were sent to the staff to undertake back in February, you won't find them necessarily by looking at the yellow highlighting.
I see. So you're right. The yellow highlighting is statements that include specific reference to the PAB.
Or the PRC, yeah.
Or the PRC, yeah. But
That's
those
correct.
are not necessarily the priorities of the implementation committee or the working group. Yeah.
No, I wasn't, I don't think I was saying that. I was just saying that kind of guides us in the direction of things that they pointed out that would impact the Police Accountability Board. But there's also a document in here dated June 15, 2021 from the city manager to the council. And it talks about kind of line item where they are with some of the things
Yeah.
that they report, and whether they're in progress, whether they're completed. So those are also areas where we can look at to maybe find some things that are important for us to focus on, items that aren't completed, or even items that are completed and maybe we would like to take a look at what.
Right. That was the first quarterly report that I was referring to. So the next quarterly report should have been September 15th because that was June 15th. So that was it came from the city manager, but it was submitted by Chief Lewis as their first quarterly report. Yeah. Yeah, you're right. Thanks. Thanks for that, Cheryl. So at this point, I think we should have a general discussion as to what we should undertake first, what our priorities are. You know, I have members of the working group. I should have mentioned that in the last, I don't know, 6 months or so, members of the working group, the mayor's working group, after submitting the package of recommendations to council, then proceeded with smaller, more informal, let's say, but always on Zoom, meetings with the chief and the mayor and council member Harrison and some of the members of the working group on 3 specific topics that the working group thought were most important to begin with. And the first of those was the formation of an early intervention system, the EIS, which is what is referred to, as George pointed out there at the top of that page 4, the first bullet under implement procedural justice reforms. It says creation of an early intervention system. And the mayor's working group thought that that was one of their chief priorities, or one of the most important places to begin, because what that kind of system is, it's an early warning system, which enables a department to see whether there's outliers in terms of particular officers or particular beats, or whether there's patterns of disparity. And they have these early warning systems in different places around the country. There is one, for example, in Oakland. So that was one of the concrete things that the working group thought should be a priority. And so we met with the chief on that, and we made quite a lot of progress, I think. She was very receptive to the working group's ideas in terms of what needs to be included in such a system. And then we also met on 2 other topics, one of them being evidence-based policing and the other being social media, the ability to check the social media of department employees. So we had these 3, actually there were 4 meetings on these 3 topics. And they were for the most part productive, and especially on the EIS system. So I know that some members of the working group, I for one, think that that's an important place to start. And I do notice in the report that Cheryl mentioned that was given on June 15th to the council, the anticipated completion date for that was August 2021 for a new EIS system related to traffic, bike, and pedestrian stops. Well, that has not occurred, and for good reason. It's not something you can easily just slap together. It's very, it takes a great deal of thought, and seems to me that that's something that we should have some oversight on. I don't know how other people feel about this. Let me open it up.
Yeah. So I want to ask a question, maybe of Peter. When the report comes out, or sooner if the subcommittee deems so, Peter, will you answer the committee's questions on the report, or will the chief be available?
that you have right now, sorry, I'm not understanding your question. If you have a question regarding the progress, can you
Yeah.
ask me? Is that what you're asking? You can certainly ask me, and I will do my best to give you as much info as I can. So yeah, I can answer whatever questions you have.
Yeah. Well, I think it would be helpful on a scheduled basis that the chief be available to attend our meeting.
I can certainly relay that to the captain, and he can relay that to the chief, but I can answer questions that you have as well, if you have any questions.
Sure.
I am, again, one of the individuals that's overseeing all this, so the chief can probably answer these questions better than I can. However, I am overseeing this project, so I can certainly answer the questions you guys have here.
Good.
Chip, you have your hand up. You're muted, Chip.
Thank you, Kitty. I have a general question that maybe anybody, this is up for grabs. Can someone explain to me what an EIS system actually consists of? Is this an algorithm? Is this physical? Is this software? What is an EIS system? And what kind of timeline for implementation are we talking?
George, do you want to take that?
Would you like me to?
Sure.
So this is either called an early intervention system or early warning system. It's a investigatory system within the police department. I don't know whether the BPD has such a system at this time. I think at some points in the past they have had, and it can it exists to kind of look for difficult issues, problems in the department, either with individuals or even with or proceeding from the individuals to determine if there's a more general departmental wide problem. It can be on any subject, but the focus of this recommendation is on bias or bias-related policing, and particularly coming from the statistics that have been released by the department, showing in that. The goal is not to be punitive. It is to understand what problems there may be, and then create a plan to, and then determine why these problems exist for the individual. And then to create a plan to help that individual overcome those problems. And only in a last case scenario would this be become a discipline issue. They're trying to get to the facts and create solutions.
So this would be a self-reporting or a peer reporting technique?
It could be peer reporting. It could be a management decision. It could be any number of sources, but what we're beginning with here is that it's data driven. So if you have, as we discovered over the years, a clear and continuing pattern of racial disparities in terms of who gets stopped and how they're treated once they're stopped. And in fact, use of force is also tracked by the Center for Policing Equity, disparities there. You can examine that data and see, okay, we'll look at each individual officer, figure out which ones have a more disparate treatment, a record of disparate treatment individually. Those we consider outliers. An outlier could be on either side. Either they're stopping far more African Americans or Latinos than white civilians. Could be the other way around. Then they have to look at those disparate individuals and say, these are people that we need to have a discussion about. That's one way of getting into the subject.
Could I just add to that? And then I'm going to call on Cheryl. She's had her hand up for a while, but I just want to add to that is it also looks to see if there other factors that may account for greater disparities among certain officers. Like it could be that they have a particular beat or a particular assignment, or there may be reasons for the disparity, perfectly legitimate reasons for the disparity. So it explores those things.
Okay.
Yeah.
This is all data driven and we're looking at past.
Data driven. Yeah.
Thank you.
Cheryl.
So my question is to Sergeant Lee. My question is, do you have an existing early warning system? Because I know a lot of police agencies have something set up, especially through IA, some sort of early warning. And if you do, can you describe what it is?
Yes, so we have a policy in place called an early warning system. I think what the recommendation was the early intervention system. Very similar, but a little different. So what we have currently, it's a EWS, which is we monitor certain dimensions. And I think what the EIS wants to add is that stop data, which requires access to data tools that we are developing. So we have something in place, yes, but not as robust as I think EIS system will be, and we are getting that together.
Sergeant Lee, if I could, when we had our meeting in the small group with Chief Lewis, I believe it was the Chief Lewis who described to us the early warning system that you currently have had, and it focused on officer welfare and that sort of thing. That's my understanding, as opposed to trying to ferret out the pattern of disparities across the department. Is that correct?
Well, the stop data is not factored into the what we're
Right.
doing now. Correct.
I see.
However, it's officer wellness is part of it, but it also monitors for different complaints, as well as different sick time usage, time off, things like that.
Mm-hmm. Could I ask you, since you're one of the people in charge of the implementation of these proposals, has there been work done on a EIS of this sort?
Has it been, have we been working on it? Is that the question?
Yeah.
Absolutely, yes. We're developing data tools. They're calling a data tool, basically an interface where supervisors can look at stop data. And we are drafting language to amend or start a policy for EIS. So a policy as well as data tools is what we're working on.
And will you be looking at other jurisdictions to see what they've done, or, to try to see which models are best?
I'm not the one developing the data tools. We have a unit that does that. So I don't know what their process is. I can say that's certainly a possibility. It's not uncommon for us to look at other agencies and why reinvent the wheel, and maybe look at what other agency doing, whether or not that works for at this agency. But I can't say for sure.
Will we be able to speak with or connect with who is developing this algorithm?
Certainly, yes. If I can certainly invite him. I might be able to answer the question. Be a question strictly on the data. I mean, it's internet based, and it basically allows supervisors to access stop data. Is the system they're developing.
So
According to, sorry, go ahead.
Sorry. So with the current data that you have, with the current tool that you use right now, your early warning system, how is data collected for that? And will the EIS system collect the data the same way?
No, that the EIS system will be a combination of what we have now, plus the data-driven tool that's being developed. So it's going to be a combination of it. It'll be new plus the old mashed in one system. It's how I understand it to be. But again, it's not that we're not there yet. So it could very well change and not be what I'm talking about. That's certainly the idea, is to keep what we have, but then expand on it.
I guess what I'm trying to figure out is what's the source of the data that you have now with your current system? The current system that you actually have now, what's the source of the data? Is it supervisors inputting data into a system? Is it peer driven, or how's that data get into the system?
Well, so we'll talk about patrol team. We'll talk about days off, sick time, right? There's not one system that captures everything. However, if you call in sick 4 days in a row, you can't do so without your direct supervisor knowing that. It goes through the supervisor. When you get a complaint, it goes through the supervisor. Depending how the complaint comes through, it can come from PRC or PAB to the supervisor, or directly from internal affairs, or the citizen can make a complaint directly to the supervisor. So no matter how you make the complaint or how a citizen makes his complaint or her complaint, it goes to the supervisor. So there's not one system that collects everything. Ultimately everything funnels through the supervisor.
Elliot. Elliot, are you muted?
So
Yes, sorry.
sorry, if I can expand a little more on E13. So I mentioned poor performance. I mentioned time off usage. I have the policy up here. It includes multiple formal, sustained, or not sustained complaints, multiple informal complaints. Uses of force is one of them as well. And again, anytime force is used, the use of force report is done by the supervisor. A supervisor has to respond to the scene. The supervisor has to do a use of force report, which then gets forwarded to the person's commander or lieutenant. Vehicle collisions are also included in E13, and substandard performance observed by supervisors. All this is part of it. So everything really funnels through a supervisor, and we want to expand on that to include stop data.
So
Which,
I'm sorry, just one quick question. The new system will have stop, search, and use of force data. Will it incorporate all 3 of those things?
I believe so, because it's based on RIPA data. I believe so, but I'm gonna have to look into that to say for sure. I believe so.
Elliot?
well, that was my question about the use of the RIPA data, which is key. And Cheryl, do you understand what the RIPA data is?
Why don't you spell it out, Elliot?
Yeah. So the RIPA data is a matrix of information that's gathered by the officers on each stop, each traffic stop or bicycle stop, and goes into, this is how I understand it, goes into a database, and it also has information on the officer, time of day, etc. So, and that database forms, a picture of the traffic stops. Anybody add to that?
It was mandated by the Racial and Identity Profiling Act. The gathering of those data. Byron, did you have your hand up? You're muted.
I do not.
Oh, all right. George.
Yeah, I'd like to get a sense of the timeline here for EIS, what the steps are to make it, you get the policy and the software developed, and what your schedule looks like. That's for Peter.
Yeah, when I can tell you the steps, a timeline. I can't give you an answer on a timeline. However, what I can say is policy and language have been drafted, and that's going towards the police association for review. The tools are being developed. Exactly when it's going to be ready, I can't say for sure. And I don't know how long the police association is going to review that policy for. I can certainly look into that and give you a better answer next time.
When you say the language, the policy language has been drafted, what do you mean?
Well, E13 is what we have right now. We want to expand on that to include the different, basically different language that echoes the recommendation. So we can apply with the recommendation. So we can mandate essentially the monitoring of it.
I think it would be really helpful if you could share that policy language with us as the BPA is looking at it as well.
Well, it's not final yet. I can certainly ask. I don't have the language in front of me, but
Understand? Yeah, understood.
We're looking at it and there's not a final draft, so I don't know where it's going to go. That's why part of it is that's another reason why when you ask me for a timeline, I'm hard pressed to provide you with a date. I mean, I can say it was August, and now we want to expand on it. So now it's October. So we're behind what we said, what we wanted to be, the date that we wanted to be done. We're 2 months, we're off schedule already. So we recognize that and we're trying to work on that.
You know, I think it would be really helpful if we had that quarterly report, and we can come up with specific questions for the chief from that report. So if you could give us a date on that, that would be helpful.
Sure.
Chip, you had your hand up for a while.
I did. Thank you, Kitty. I just wanted to ask you, Sergeant Lee, does this, the implementation and the creation of the EIS, are you looking for outside help and recommendation in crafting and molding this?
It was a similar question that somebody asked earlier. I can't say for sure, but it's not uncommon for us to look at other agencies and how they do.
I'm talking about.
I'm talking about, sorry, you cut off.
I'm talking about from this body and bodies like this in Berkeley.
I'm not getting your question. You kind of cut off. Sorry.
Okay, excuse me. So what I'm asking is, are you asking for our input and helping to mold and develop the EIS system to help you guys further this, this project that is already behind schedule?
Sure. We as Kitty and I were on another task force with Tano before. We met several times regarding these recommendations. We took a lot of input. That's why I'm here, to take your suggestions back to the department. So certainly, yes, I'm here to hear your input and suggestion. And my job is to answer as many questions as I can and bring your suggestions back to my captain. So that's why I'm here. And I'm going to answer whatever I can. A lot of this is in the middle. We're in the middle of it. So I know it's going to be frustrating when I want to be able to provide you with a date and say, hey, this is exactly when it's going to be done, and this is what it's going to look like. The truth is, it's really fluid, and I can't say for sure. I can tell you what we're working on and how we're going about accomplishing these recommendations, but the timeline is a little uncertain, especially with the EIS.
Following up on that, I think in terms of collaboration, it could be really useful if we could see the policy draft, understanding that it's preliminary.
I don't have that with me, and that's something I will.
No, I meant for next time.
Sure, I can certainly ask. I don't know I'll bring that suggestion to my captain, and next time I'll let you know what the department says.
George,
Yeah, the history, and I met you a few years ago, actually. We were talking about the data issues. I think we met at the department, we looked at some of the data there. So I know you've been working on these. This is George here. Hi. I know you've been working on these issues for a while. You have some background in it. The practice with the PRC going back many years was that there would be a collaborative approach to developing policy. I know that whenever the PRC developed a policy, there'd be a work group like this, and the department would be welcome in there to give ongoing feedback. I'm not sure if there's a decision to pull that back, but the approach that we have, that I'm hearing today, seems to be very different from that. And I would say it would be more than nice for this group to see what you're working on. It would really be essential to go to the maximum amount of collaboration that can be gained. And there's been a lot of work that's been done in the community and community organizations on this issue. And then there has been a level of frustration about repeatedly missed deadlines over the past several years. I just think we have to go the extra mile to show the community that we're working together. And, we can ask you questions, but without knowing what we're looking at, we don't even know what the right questions are to ask. I would recommend, I'm not a member of the board. The board is with the group that would have to actually make the decisions about what position that you want to take. But it'd be my personal opinion as a member of the community, that'd be critical to establish a more collaborative approach on this.
Cheryl.
I believe that all the policies are going to be reviewed by the PAB. I think that's in our charter. So it's not, I understand what you're saying, Mr. Lippman. You're asking to be part of the process of developing the policy. But for sure, once the policy is developed, it will go in front of the PAB to review it. So we will have some input into that policy.
Actually, I'm going to ask if that's accurate, because I recall at one point something being in the charter amendment that said that the chief would share all policies with the board within 30 days after they were put into practice, after the fact. And
I
that
have
was
Measure, Mr. Lippman, I have Measure II in front of me, and you are essentially correct. It says the chief of police shall submit all newly adopted departmental policies and revisions to the board within 30 days of implementation, which doesn't necessarily preclude you from making further recommendations or changes.
Well, it also doesn't preclude the department, the city manager, and the board from agreeing to bring the board into the process earlier. It just says it has to be by then, but if we want to say, and I think I'd recommend that the board establish now its intention that such policies would be developed collaboratively and that you would have the ability to see them.
That is in fact, George is correct. That is in fact how when the PRC developed the new use of force policy recommendations, we did it in collaboration with the department. And it really would be important for collaborative purposes, especially because, there has been a lot of research done on EIS programs around the country. And it could be really helpful for this committee to view drafts of what's being put together before a final version is established. And you know, it really would speak to collaboration if we could do this collaboratively. I mean, it is true that there is that language in the charter about seeing policies within 30 days of its implementation, but there's also language in the charter that the PAB can ask for anything it needs from the department. The PAB has the authority to request this. So I would hope that collaboration would prevail. It just seems to me it would be helpful to be able to see the process as it goes and to have input. But you know, it's now 3:34, and I guess maybe what we should do at this point is talk about, I mean, I think this is one of the key things that we should focus on, but I want to hear from other members of the subcommittee what their thoughts are on in terms of focus. Cheryl.
So Kay, you started out with, when you started out with this EIS system, you said there were 3 priorities. Did you mention the other 2?
It wasn't so much that they were priorities, it was 3 topics of discussion that, yes, the 3 topics of discussion that we had in small groups was the EIS, the evidence-based stops, and the social media scans. And I think that the working group kind of agreed that the EIS discussion in those smaller groups was the most productive. It's a concrete product. I also think that it is probably past time for us to get analysis of the more recent data, which was one of the other mandates. I think it's in this highlighted version that Director Lee provided us. We're supposed to get regular data analysis having to do with stops and searches. I don't know, Cheryl, if that answers your question, but the other 2 were evidence-based policing and social media. Elliot.
Yeah. Also, Kitty, I think you suggested that it might be helpful for all the members to quickly go through the proposal and maybe provide some the members that have been through it, providing some background, maybe for the next meeting. And I still think the meeting, the progress of the police on the whole plan is key for us to move forward.
I agree. I also, Sergeant Lee, I'm wondering if, has the department hired the 2 analysts that were going to be coming on board?
I think they're looking for one right now. They have not hired them yet, no.
So has there been any data analysis done within the department on the subject of disparities, stop searches? And
I'm not familiar with the most recent analysis, no.
Can I ask, has there been any RIPA data analysis?
Recently, I believe we're in the process of CPE. That report, I don't know where we're at with that, but we are in contract with CPE, yes.
Can we find that out for our next meeting?
Yes.
Thank you.
Sure. The date for the next CPE report, sure.
Well, I think we'd like to know what is the most recent analysis that the department has access to in terms of its stop search and use of force data. Because that was also one of the mandates from council, that those analyses should be done regularly. And it's really imperative for our business to see where we stand on that. Elliot, I'm sorry, to go back to your suggestion, when you said to go through the report, did you mean the report that's in this packet here that was passed by city council, or did you
Right,
mean the working group?
right.
Okay.
Hello?
The proposal.
And you think it would be useful to do what?
Well, just to quickly go through it and update the members that haven't been part of it. If we think that's necessary, just a suggestion.
I'll open it up to the people who might think that would be useful. Chip and Jamie and Cheryl, would that be something that?
Just speaking for myself, I think I'm good with like having read the packet and hearing the discussion. So I don't know that I personally need to go through piece by piece.
Okay. So what we have so far is we're requesting that the EIS draft policy language be shared. We're requesting the progress report as soon, noting that it's important to get that as soon as possible. And when is that coming? And also the data analysis. What is the most recent data analysis that's been done by the department? And related to that, when will these analysts be coming on board? It wasn't clear to me. Have they been offered? Are they lined up to come on board, or are you still looking for them?
I believe we're still looking for them, but I'll give you a better answer next time. I can't say that for sure.
One of our subcommittee members would be really good. Speaking about George Lippman.
So, Chair, are you thinking about sending a message documenting or memorializing these requests?
Yes, I was summarizing for just to catch us up here, and also, but I will definitely do that. I think it would be useful after each meeting to have some memorialization of what was decided. But I also would like to hear from other group members which of these policy changes you all think we should prioritize. Because one way to go about it is to look at what we consider biggest and most important. Another way to look at it is to take some low-hanging fruit, some very concrete things, like, for example, the requirement for written consent for searches. We talked about this with the chief and other members of the department, I believe, and saw that they have a written consent form, but it's not always used. And in any case, the working group proposed changes to that. So that's something very concrete that could have, I think, some substantial impact. A good written consent form before a person before an officer does a consent search of a person's vehicle or person. Elliot, you have your hand up?
Yeah. So I also think that the policy on evidence-based policing is important. It should be a priority. The department in our conversations with them seem to be interpreting that a little differently. So I think that's an important area.
I think you have a good list, Chair. for
Okay.
beginner.
Cheryl, you have your hand up?
Yes, I was going to suggest that we look at, it's page 4 on the action calendar of the highlighted stuff down at the bottom. And I think this is where our, the director of the PAB highlighted this stuff, and there's number 5. And it says something about training recommendations. They talk about accelerated crisis intervention team activity, enhanced annual implicit bias training. It also talks about the written consent. I'm wondering if that's also a good list to kind of look at as to some things that we can kind of focus on as well.
Yes, that last thing you mentioned is what I was just saying in terms of requiring written consent for searches.
Right.
Yeah.
but Talking about the
Yeah.
other stuff that's right above it, where they talk about scenario-based training,
Mm-hmm,
annual implicit bias training,
mm-hmm.
CIT activity.
All right,
Just a suggestion.
yeah. So we have a lot here, and I guess I'd like to suggest that we try to not do everything at once, but to follow some, you know, structure if that's possible. So I guess in a way we need to wait for this progress report to see what has been done. And so and then in terms of these training things that you pointed out, Cheryl, we need to find out, I assume from the progress report, whether those training, whether anything has been done along those lines. I looked at a training module the other day from the department on implicit bias training, and it looked pretty good. I don't know when the last one was done or how often it's done or whether it, who's being brought in to do that. But those are definitely things that we have to pursue. So, George.
So I'm hearing you say 2 things. One is we should consider low-hanging fruit as well as policy priorities. And then you're saying, but we don't want to have too much. So
Right. I actually wasn't saying we should have, I was saying these are sort of 2 alternative ways of proceeding.
Okay, so I would lean towards not the low-hanging fruit necessarily, especially if we're going to wait possibly 3 weeks until the quarterly report comes out.
Mm-hmm.
But if we focus on what we think is critical to get started on, and I think the EIS, as far as I'm concerned, is one of those. Regularizing the quarterly reports is another one. And well, as part of the EIS, I think the conversation about bringing us into the development of that. And maybe one other thing. And then that would probably be pretty good for a first report and communication. The evidence-based stops, it's such a murky topic where we're kind of talking past each other,
Mm-hmm.
that we're gonna have to get to that.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of like, I think where we left it off in the conversations that I observed was, we want to know how people are being trained, how officers are being trained, both around what evidence-based stops means and what the meaning of of not stopping people based on race is. Like, what actually does that mean? How do you make the decision that you have enough evidence to stop somebody when you know it's not enough to say, well, they're Black and a man? But yet, you don't have to know every single thing about them. There has to be somewhere in between that you probably won't find in law or judicial precedent, but is determined generally by local departments' policy. So that's a long conversation that has already begun, but not concluded. But I would say, let's get the things done that are highest on the list and that actually can get done within the next few months. I believe EIS is one of those.
I agree with that. Byron, do you have your hand up?
I do
Cheryl
not.
does. And
I do
Jim,
not.
you had your hand up.
Oh, all right. Cheryl,
So here's what I would like to suggest in addition to what Mr. Lippman suggested. We clearly need some feedback from the department as to where they stand on this EIS system. So I would look to Sergeant Lee at our next meeting to come with a report outlining where they are with EIS, more specifics as to sources of data, just more specifics about the system. And even if you don't have a firm timeline, what's the hope, the expectation, or, for that timeline. I think that there's a lot of things that we have questions of the department that we don't know. So we have to lean on Sergeant Lee as part of this process to bring it back to our subcommittee. Some of this other stuff when it comes to the training, I just have a question as to I'm not sure, Sergeant Lee, if you guys have a training sergeant, training lieutenant, or whoever runs that group, but can they come in and talk to us about the training that is the enhanced training for the implicit bias, the scenario based training, but just to give us kind of an update on what's going on with that. I don't think that that's something that we have to necessarily work on as a group, but at least we get some feedback on what's going on with training and where that stands. So I think for me, a lot of this is feedback from the department before we can really grab something and run with it. Because a lot of this stuff, it sounds like it's not quite developed and we don't have, everything is kind of fuzzy as to when it's going to be developed, what's going on with it. I don't know, Sergeant Lee, if someone who's directly working with this a new system can come to our next meeting and talk specifics about the system, the sources, what the plan implementation date is, just anything. And that's also, we can talk about policy surrounding that as well, and kind of voice our desire to be part of drafting that policy. So maybe we can get somebody that has more intimate knowledge about those two subjects to come to our next meeting. That's my suggestion.
Kitty, Jamie had her hand up.
Jamie, sorry, I can't see.
Oh, I don't think if I did, that was an accident, but I guess I would just tend to agree with, I think the suggestion several have made of focusing on the EIS as a first priority. It seems like concrete and it's at a point where we could really weigh in.
Thanks, Jamie. Chip, you have your hand up?
I do. I also I wanted us to just think about and maybe hear from Sergeant Lee and Officer Norris about how meet and confer will play into anything we do that will be pertaining to EIS. This will bring up meet and confer, correct?
Correct. Change the policy does meet and confer could be a process. It could not be. So, but it's the possibility. It depends. It really depends on the policy and it depends on the association.
And thank you for that. That's a candid as I could ask for. That might delay any kind of work or implementation or development of the EIS system that could put us months and months behind. Just want to lay that out there.
Is the police union part of the EIS process and the development of the policy? Are they part of that process, or are they gonna review it after it's developed?
They're part of the process, yes, but there's also a meet and confer that could happen. We're in an implementation phase of things. I understand that the data tools are being developed. I know everybody wants a timeline. I wish I could provide that. I can say we're making a lot of progress on these tools, and I can't give details, and I can certainly reach out to the guy, Matt E. I think Kitty and George and maybe a number of you have already met him. He's one of the individuals responsible for developing these tools. I mean, don't quote me on this, but I'm pretty confident he's toward the end. He's near completion of this development of these tools. As far as me conferring the policy process, yeah, when there's changes in the policy and it affects work condition, the police association is involved, and there is a meeting confer, possibly a meeting confer process.
So what would be, I mean, I want to follow up on what Cheryl just mentioned, because I totally agree. It could be really good, useful for our next meeting if is it Sergeant Yee, Matt Yee?
Officer Matt Yee, yes.
Yeah. If he's the one who's primarily heading up or overseeing the EIS development, it could be really useful for him to attend our next meeting, and we'll get the schedule so that he could be available and come with a report on where they are. And he could possibly, he would, I assume, be able to answer our questions, and we can give him our input as well, not just a one-way street here. And I would request that we could, that he or you could bring a draft of the policy narrative. Now, I understand that it's being processed together with the BPA, but the meet and confer process usually happens after a policy is developed before it's implemented. So I really think it would be useful for all concerned for us to have a role as that language is being developed. In any case, totally concur that it'd be great to have Matt Yee with us next time and be able to report on where they are and what they intend going forward.
I can certainly, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I know George had his hand up. I can certainly bring that to the captain and also ask Matt if he's available. But a lot of what you guys are asking has, for example, somebody had a question about training and how training happens and who gives the training, how it's given, and what kind of training we're mandated to provide to the officers. I want to say it's a PAB. I don't remember which organization, but we provided that training to a number of bodies. I'm not sure which, maybe Byron Norris can advise on that. But what you guys are asking was exactly what we provided to, I want to say, a PAB. So that's certainly something I can reach out and see if they want to present that again, as well as what Matt Yee is doing. He's done several presentations. I want to say to Reimagine group.
That's where I was gonna ask you if you were referring to the Reimagining Task Force.
That might be.
Does that
it.
ring
If
a
it's not
bell?
PAB, if it's not PAB, then it was a Reimagining Task Force.
Okay.
Several.
I'm not sure, but that's most likely the other culprit.
PAB did not get that.
The PAB did not. Okay, then it must have been the Reimagined Task Force. So yeah, I will bring your suggestion to the captain and then to Matt E, and we'll go from there. But my understanding is there's been a number of presentations given regarding training, regarding the FTO process, and regarding, I believe, the tools we're developing.
Right, but for the next meeting, it would be, we're going to focus on the EIS. So if Officer Yee could come to that and and if you could ask for the draft policy language so that we could begin to have some input.
Sure.
George,
I just want to say it I would put it a little more strongly. And this is not, personal. It's certainly, I know this is above your pay grade, literally, sir. But, for the police association to be part of the development of this policy, as well as being vetting it afterwards through meet and confer possibly. The PAB is part of the government. You're part of the government. We're in this together. We have a charter passed by 85% of the city saying that we give oversight to policies. I think it is really up to the board, not to me, and not probably to this subcommittee to make this decision. But I think it would be appropriate for the board to say, we expect to be part of the development of this policy, not just we'd like to talk about it, we'd like to hear about it. But again, that's up to your decision within the full board.
well, I think that's what we're talking about, having a collaborative approach. Chip,
I also wanted to make sure we got to follow up on that non-biased training,
yeah,
just so we'd have some information on that next meeting. That's it.
all right. I'm thinking, I mean, I don't know what others think, but I'm thinking for the purpose of focus that we have two issues lined up here. And it seems to me for the purpose of focus, the next time it ought to be on the EIS. And then we could move to the training issue. I don't know what others think, but I don't want to be too scattered. Cheryl.
Can I suggest that we as a subcommittee focus on the early warning or early intervention system and the training piece, especially because Sergeant Lee says it's been presented in other areas. How about if, and Kitty and Chip, let me know what you think, but I'm thinking maybe that's something that should be done at the board level. That way all of our board members also get that training. And they're not doing training for the subcommittee and then the board's gonna want it. So maybe we do that training piece at the board level and we as a subcommittee focus on this early intervention system.
That's a really good idea. What do people think about that? I think it's a really good idea.
I support it.
Yeah. Okay. So it's 4 o'clock and we have our tasks before us. Next time we'll be focusing on the EIS and we'll try to get the next meeting scheduled so everybody can attend, and also Sergeant Lee and Officer Yee. And two other things that we asked Sergeant Lee to take back. One is that we need the quarterly report as well as the latest data analyses of REBA data. And I think those are all good places to start. Cheryl.
Honestly, I can't remember. Did you say that we are asking Officer or Sergeant Lee to also work with us to get the training presentation done at our full board, or should we talk about it at our full board before we do that?
Yeah, we can arrange that separately with the board and Director Lee.
And just for me and for those of us that are new to this, is there any sort of documentation that goes in more detail about this early intervention system that exists that I can kind of go back and look at prior to our next meeting, just so I have more background in it?
If you go on the police department's website, all our policies are on there. If you look up E13, General Order E13, that is our current early warning system. So I think that'll give you a good idea of how EIS will look like, because that's going to be part of it. It's going to be expanding on that.
I would, regarding training for the board, I would urge you to seek the board approval for that. Remember that you are an advisory subcommittee.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. George,
Two things about the EIS. I understand what Commissioner Owens is asking, and I don't think that'll be satisfied with the policy about the current system. I think you're looking for background information, like where it's worked in other places or how it's worked. And I think, if I'm right, it might be good to invite a presenter from Oakland to talk about how it's functioned there. And I while I have the floor, remember how hard it was to set this meeting? That was like
yeah,
vicious. Could we just take a second to say, hey, turns out we can all meet on Saturday morning or something to make it a little bit easier on Kathy and Byron? I don't know.
is this a time that most people can meet? Since we're here Thursday afternoon at 2:30, is this, hey, ah,
Kitty, meet Kitty.
yeah, I have a kitty too. Is this Thursday afternoon a time that typically people can meet?
Other than next Thursday, I'm pretty open on Thursdays at 2:30, so this would be a good time for me.
Okay. I'm going to see if we can get a series of meetings pre-scheduled, so we don't have to just do it each time. And it would be nice if there was a set day and time. George, do you have your hand up again?
No, but I did have that suggestion about inviting a presenter.
Yes, I think
Okay.
that's a good idea.
Okay, we can talk about that.
Yeah, I think that's a really good idea. So next time, let's see if we can get Officer Yee here and focus on the EIS. And then we'll see whether the PAB agrees that it would be good to have a session, not a session, but one of our meetings with a presentation on training. And meantime, we're going to get data analyses and progress reports. Elliot, did you have something?
Just, and you're going to put some notes out about this meeting in case
I
we
will.
think about something else.
I will. Yeah. Okay. Is there any further public comment?
There are no members of the public present.
All right. I move that the meeting be adjourned.
A second.
Hearing no objections. Thank you all, and thank you, Sergeant Lee, for being here. And
Thank
see you next time.
Thank you, Chair.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you all.